Hello dear viewers, support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it, and also make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Tyrion III. When Tyrion waddled into the small council chambers, Joffrey was pacing back and forth, a gleeful look on his face. He was whispering to himself something that Tyrion couldn't understand, but the boy looked thoroughly unhinged. Something that furthered Tyrion's worry was that the boy's mother looked pleased as well. She had a smug grin on her beautiful face as she sipped her wine. "Kill any puppies today?" he asked dryly to his nephew as he took his seat. Normally a comment like that would have set Joffrey off in a childish rant, but he was too happy to notice. He gestured to Varys. "Tell him," he ordered. The eunuch folded his arms inside his sleeves. "My little birds in the Reach have told me that Renly Baratheon is dead and that Robb Stark has been grievously injured." Tyrion was shocked. "Dead?" he asked. "Who killed him?" Varys shook his head. "It is unknown. There are speculations that it was Robb Stark, but there are also rumors that Stannis had a hand in it. The only confirmed information I have is that Renly was stabbed in the back." "And Robb Stark?" Tyrion asked, ignoring the humorous smile that Baelish had on his face when Varys mentioned how Renly had died. Varys shook his head again. "My little birds don't know that either, but the maesters say that his back might be broken. He has been brought back to Bitterbridge, and is currently under the care of the Tyrells. I want a raven sent to Highgarden immediately ordering Mace Tyrell to bring Stark to me," Joffrey snapped. "I can't wait to behead him the same way I beheaded his father." Tyrion wagged a finger. "Firstly, you didn't kill Ned Stark, you merely ordered his death." "There's a difference," he said. "Besides, I just repaired our relations with the Faith and I will not allow you to screw that up again. Secondly, you have had a good idea for the first time, except you want to go about it the wrong way." "What are you suggesting?" Pycelle asked curiously. "Mace Tyrell is a power-hungry fool," Tyrion stated, pouring himself a chalice of wine. "If we marry the king to his daughter, then we not only get a massive army, but we also get food that the city desperately needs." Cersei looked up when Tyrion mentioned marriage. "You will not marry off my son like some pawn," she said angrily. "Besides, he's betrothed to Sansa Stark." Tyrion sighed, shaking his head. "This is the way of war," he said, looking at his sister. "Besides, Margaery Tyrell is more beautiful than Sansa Stark and brings more to our side. We need the Tyrells." He turned to Joffrey, who seemed to be actually interested in what Tyrion was saying. "Believe me, your grace, you cannot ask for a better marriage prospect. She is known as the Rose of Highgarden. And they can bring Robb Stark to me," he said wickedly, completely ignoring what Tyrion had just said. Tyrion nodded. "If we have Stark, we can single-handedly bring the war to an end, and then we can focus on Stannis," he said. "Now the only question is who will treat with the Tyrells." "Lord Baelish," Cersei said, looking at the Master of Coin. "Do you think you're up for the task?" The man known as Littlefinger smirked slightly, bowing his head. "I will do what I can," he promised humbly. "As always, I am at the service of his grace." Tyrion pursed his lips. Baelish was not his first choice. He didn't trust the man as far as Bronn could throw him. Then again, Tyrion didn't trust anyone in the Bloody City, but Baelish was at the top of that list. "What about one of his grace's Kingsguard?" Tyrion suggested. "Ser Aris Oakheart is a man of the Reach, is he not?" Cersei waved aside Tyrion's suggestion. "My son's guards are needed here," she said firmly. "Those who went after his uncle might come for him next." Tyrion glared at his sister, making his feelings known about her suggestion before he sighed. "Fine. Lord Baelish, leave as soon as possible. Make sure Stark is included in the deal," Joffrey added again. Baelish bowed his head again. "Thank you, your grace, for your faith in my abilities." "Varys, do we know why Robb Stark was in the Reach?" Tyrion asked, looking at the eunuch. The chubby bald man nodded. "It seems he was seeking an alliance with Renly." Tyrion was not a religious man, but he thanked the Seven that Stannis or whoever had interfered with the talks between the Northern King and Renly. If those two had combined forces, then the Lannisters and Stannis would have been well and truly fucked. "What of the Stormlords?" Pycelle wheezed out. "Back to Stannis, I'm afraid," Varys answered. 20,000 men. Tyrion cursed under his breath. "Send word to Lord Riker to have his men ready in case Stannis attacks the capital," he ordered. "My uncle wouldn't be so bold to attack the city," Joffrey declared arrogantly. "He's too afraid to face me." Tyrion bit his tongue, stopping himself from mentioning the fact that Joffrey has never been on the battlefield before, and wouldn't be doing so anytime soon. The glare from Cersei also helped Tyrion hold his tongue. Your Grace, Tyrion started. Stannis held out against the Reach, and later beat the Iron Fleet at sea. He's a proven military commander. Let's assume that he is bold enough to attack the city. Joffrey sniffed but didn't say anything. Lord Varys, is there anything else that we should know? Tyrion asked, ready to move on to any other subjects. My little birds have been rather busy in the north, he said. Edmure Tully has married Rosalind Frey, the Northern Army has conquered most of the Westerlands, and it seems that Balon Greyjoy has rebuilt the Iron Fleet to its full strength. Tyrion frowned. The Iron Fleet? He asked. I thought that King Robert had banned the man from reforming his fleet. Varys nodded. It's true, King Robert did place such a ban on the Iron Islands. My little birds have told me that Balon Greyjoy has placed a crown on his head once again. I want his head! Joffrey barked immediately. Cersei made a soothing sound. My father will deal with him, Joff, she said calmly. In due time he will deal with these false kings. Pycelle nodded. Quite right, he grumbled. It's a terrible thing, fighting against your lawful king. So you're saying that Robert Baratheon was wrong for rebelling against Aerys Targaryen? Tyrion asked innocently. The old maester spluttered. Of course not, he replied indignantly. The Mad King killed a Lord Paramount and his son in cold blood. Tyrion nodded slowly. My nephew killed a Lord Paramount, as well. So you're saying that the Starks are right to rebel? Of course not, the Grand Maester replied again. Eddard Stark was spouting treason. Tyrion rolled his eyes, done with playing with the old man. He looked back at Varys, who had watched the byplay with a small amount of amusement. Lord Varys, you say that the Northmen have conquered most of the Westerlands. Varys nodded. Indeed, from Banefort to Hornvale, as well as the mines at Deep Den and Silverhill. But not Casterly Rock, Cersei said. Varys nodded. Correct, Your Grace. It seems the Northern Army has gone to great lengths to stay away from the castle and the neighboring city. Cowards, Joffrey snarled. Tyrion shook his head. Perhaps, but my father will have made sure that the rock was properly prepared for a siege. He would never leave it undefended. If the Stark army wants the rock, it would have to commit a large portion of its army to the siege. How do you know so much about siege preparations? Cersei asked curiously, narrowing her eyes at her brother. Tyrion shrugged. It's common sense, my dear sister, he said with false sweetness in his voice. Now I believe we have bigger problems than the rock not being attacked. And what's that? Joffrey asked. The Ironborn, Tyrion stated simply. Let's look at the facts. The Northern King is currently in the Reach, and was trying to forge an alliance between himself and Renly, one that would have certainly killed us all if it had worked. Now if he's willing to treat with Renly, who has no lawful claim to the throne, then what's to stop him from reaching out to the Ironborn as well? Stark would never ally with the Ironborn, Cersei argued. His father fought them. Tyrion sighed. We have spent the entire war saying that Robb Stark can't do this or do that. Aren't you tired of underestimating the boy? He asked, looking around at the council. Stop treating him like a boy and treat him like the son of Eddard Bloody Stark, the man who was instrumental in tearing down the Targaryen dynasty. The room was quiet after Tyrion's rant. Baelish and Varys looked a little amused, while Pycelle seemed angry for some reason. Cersei and her son also looked a little angry after Tyrion's outburst, but probably because they felt like he was insinuating that Robb Stark was more dangerous than Tywin. Tyrion sighed. My father will deal with the Stark boy, he said finally. We must keep our eyes on Stannis and make sure that terms are reached with the Tyrells before they choose another king to serve. Tyrion was about to bring the council to a close. Cersei spoke up again. Lord Varys, what news is there on the Targaryen girl? Tyrion raised an eyebrow. Targaryen girl. Varys nodded. Indeed, Daenerys Targaryen, daughter of the Mad King and the last living Targaryen. She is currently in Essos, and has managed to bring 3 dragons back to life. Tyrion, who was taking a drink of wine, nearly spat the liquid on the table. He looked in disbelief at the eunuch like he had suddenly grown hair and a cock. Others around the table didn't look too surprised. Dragons? He asked, shocked. Varys nodded. My poor little bird was very shaken up, but they were quite clear. 3 dragons, no bigger than house cats. We should kill her now, Joffrey said, his voice wavering slightly. before she has a chance of taking my throne. Cersei nodded. I couldn't agree more. Tyrion shook his head slowly. Let's table that idea for the time being, he said, thinking quickly. From the sound of it, the girl is quite powerless, is she not? Varys nodded. Correct. Her only friends seem to be Ser Jorah Mormont, an exiled knight who is the crown's informant on the girl, and Ser Barristan Selmy. Tyrion cursed, sending a dirty look towards Joffrey. We need to keep that last part secret, he said. If others hear that the girl has dragons and the most famous knight in the realm by her side, we may yet have another monarch emerge in this bloody war. Which is why she needs to die. Cersei pushed. Tyrion shook his head again. No, we cannot make a martyr of her. If we wait, let her wander around powerless in Essos. She is no threat to us. Are you mad? Joffrey said. The bitch has dragons. They are no bigger than house cats, Tyrion said firmly. Think carefully, Your Grace. Aegon the Conqueror did not take Westeros with dragons that were a few years old. Balerion and the others were hundreds of years old. The dragons pose no threat to anyone, and won't for years. Besides, she has no children. By the time the dragons are rideable, there will be no one to ride them. Then Essos will have 3 wild dragons roaming their lands, and we will be just fine. What if she is married? Cersei asked. Then we kill the husband, Tyrion said simply. We ensure that the girl remains powerless and friendless. Cersei glared at her brother, but Tyrion didn't budge. She huffed. Fine, but if she invades Westeros, then it is on your head, and we will have no choice but to have her killed. Tyrion nodded. If she is making plans to invade Westeros, we will then have her assassinated before she arrives, he said firmly. One problem at a time, sister. One problem at a time. Robb had woken a few times, but they were random fragments of memory, blurry and unclear. The only thing he could remember was the soft voice that told him to drink. He remembered the cool, clean water sliding down his throat before he drifted back off to sleep. When Robb opened his eyes this time, he was at first confused at what he was seeing. It was a wood, not the cloth roof of Renly's tent that he had remembered before he had blacked out. With a groan, Robb brought a hand up to wipe his face before running it through his hair. It was then he noticed that he was on a bed, with an actual pillow under his head. He was also aware that he was only wearing a pair of breeches. He could feel his bare toes wiggling against the blanket that covered his bottom half. When Robb tried to sit up, there was terrible pain throughout his back. It felt like a stampede of horses had run over him after a lumberjack had taken his axe to his back. Robb couldn't remember a time when he had been in so much pain in his life. It was unbearable, and just sitting up almost caused Robb to black out once again. With a choked cry of pain, Robb crumbled back down onto the mattress. "You're awake," a voice cried from next to him. Robb turned his head to see Margaery rising quickly from a chair next to the bed. The girl had obviously just woken up. Her hair, which had once been neatly braided, was slowly coming loose as numerous strands of hair waved in front of her face. Her eyes were slightly red-rimmed from stress and worry, but she still looked like an angel to Robb. She rushed over to him, helping him lie back down. "How are you feeling?" she asked frantically, grabbing a nearby pitcher and pouring a glass of water for Robb. With her offhand, she held Robb's head up slightly as he took a drink from the cup. "I feel like my back was trampled by a herd of horses," Robb groaned weakly. He looked around the room. "Where am I? How many days has it been?" "You're at Bitterbridge, Robb." "It's been a week," Margaery answered. "What happened that night? What happened in Renly's tent?" Robb grimaced. "Renly's dead, isn't he?" he asked, Margaery's face already giving him an answer. He sighed, rubbing his face. "Renly and I were talking. He was telling me about southern politics, and was about to give me an answer when things in the tent changed." Margaery touched his arm gently. Robb couldn't help but notice how soft and warm her hands were. "Changed how?" Robb ground his teeth, working through the pain that was coursing through his back. The candles went out, and the wind picked up when the damn thing rose out of the ground. He had the face of Stannis Baratheon. "I tried to warn Renly, I called his name, but it was too late. When Renly turned around, that thing put his hand through Renly's chest." Robb answered in a hoarse whisper. "Brienne and Robbar must have heard me yell because they rushed into the tent with their weapons drawn. Both of them were batted aside as if they weighed nothing. Robbar swung at the creature, but his sword went through the demon like it wasn't even there. It disappeared when my sword touched it." Margaery went pale as Robb told his story. Brienne said the same thing. She breathed quietly. No one believed her. Loras is convinced that you killed him. Robb shook his head. I would never kill Renly. Margaery stroked his hair. I know Robb, she said quietly. She then realized what she was doing and dropped her hand back down to her lap, much to Robb's sadness. How was your sword able to harm it but not set a Robbars? Robb looked around the room, his eyes quickly finding his sword. Unsheath it, he said, nodding to it. Margaery quickly grabbed the sword and unsheathed it, taking in the dark ripples patterned on the blade. It's Valyrian steel, she said softly. Robb nodded slightly. I don't know why it was the only weapon able to hurt it, but it did. What happened after I blacked out? Margaery sheathed the blade and leaned it against the bed, her face turning red with embarrassment. Loras was enraged. The worst I've ever seen him. He and Renly have always been close, she said before Robb interrupted her. They were lovers, weren't they? He said, his voice gentle and understanding. Margaery nodded slightly. Loras loved Renly. When he found the three of you and Renly dead, he went mad with rage, Robb. He had Brienne and Robbar imprisoned, and was close to executing them on the spot for failure to protect their king. Only the intervention of your companions stopped him. My brother then had your friends imprisoned as well for conspiring with a kingslayer. He was about to have you join them when my grandmother intervened. She said that as a king, you deserve better. You were also grievously wounded. My father sided with Loras and your friends, Robbar and Brienne were imprisoned. My grandmother and I were able to convince my father that we should deal with them here at Bitterbridge, where you could heal and my brother Garland and I could work on talking down Loras. She finished, pouting. It's been no use. He's bent on vengeance for Renly. Where is your brother now? Robb asked. Margaery looked towards the door. He's in the hall right now. He's done waiting, Robb. He's ready to kill your friends. Robb shook his head angrily, his mind becoming instantly clear and focused at the thought of his friend's death. He tried to rise, but once again, the pain in his back caused him to fall back down. With a growl, he rolled onto his side, swinging his legs over the edge of the bed till he was able to sit up, one hand instantly grasping his sword for support. After taking a few breaths, he shoved himself to his feet, swaying perilously. His back was still in immense pain, but the young wolf shoved that to the back of his mind. There was no time for him to stay in bed, not when his friends needed him. He won't, Robb growled. Margaery nodded, grabbing a nearby shirt and helping Robb into it. Her hands briefly touched Robb's toned stomach, but her touch was soon replaced with the shirt as it was over his arms, and it fell loose around his waist. With his sword acting like a cane in his right hand and Margaery supporting him on his left, Robb began to walk towards the hall, shuffling painfully. The halls were filled with art and banners, but Robb ignored it all, his mind solely focused on his next step and bringing himself closer to the Great Hall and his friends. Two men in Tyrell liveries stood guard at the door. When Robb came into view, they went to stop him, but a snap command from Margaery stopped them. Open the doors, she ordered. The guards nodded quickly and pushed the doors open, allowing Robb and Margaery to shuffle into the room, right in the middle of the trial. Brienne, Ser Robbar, Daisy, Small John, and Darren were all bound and gagged on their knees in front of a dais where Mace Tyrell and most of his family were seated. His wife and two men who looked a lot like Loras sat next to him while the Knight of Flowers himself paced the ground in front of the stand like a caged lion, glaring at the 6 prisoners. Lady Olenna stood off to the side, not bothering to hide her disappointment with her son and grandson. All eyes turned to Robb and Margaery when they walked in, but Robb didn't care. He noticed bruises on his friends' arms and faces, fresh ones. Loras locked eyes with him. Robb could feel the hate radiating off him. He pointed at the Northern King. Guards, he screamed, pointing at the king in the north. Arrest! But he got no further. Margaery stepped forward from under the arm of Robb. You will do no such thing, Loras. Loras turned his glare on her. Stay out of this, Margaery, he shouted. This man murdered Renly. Robb growled. Adrenaline was racing through his body, giving him energy. He stepped up next to Margaery, standing a little straighter. I did no such thing, you stupid fool, he roared back. Renly was killed by an assassin sent by Stannis Baratheon. Myself, Brienne, and Robbar had nothing to do with it. Loras snorted. You honestly think I believe you, he said disdainfully. You killed Renly because you were jealous of him. He wasn't going to agree to your pathetic alliance, and so you killed him for it. Robb took a deep breath, calming himself. I swear on my honor as a Stark that I, nor my men, nor Brienne and Ser Robbar, had anything to do with the murder of Renly Baratheon. He looked around the room where many of the lords and knights of the Reach were standing. Who here is willing to challenge my oath? No one spoke or even whispered to take up Robb's challenge. Loras looked around trying to find an ally, but none stepped forward. He looked back at his father, his only friend in the whole ordeal. "Father," he pleaded, but even Mace Tyrell shook his head. "I cannot dispute his claim, Loras," he said quietly. "The members of House Stark are many things, but they are above all honorable and truthful." Loras's face turned red with rage and sadness. He turned on Robb. "Fine," he snapped. "Who did it?" Robb nodded to his companions. "Untie them first," he ordered. Loras hesitated but nodded. A group of guardsmen stepped forward and took off the gags and chains. Robb's companions and the two rainbow guards rubbed their wrists and faces, looking gratefully at Robb and glaring at Loras. It was the priestess that Stannis had with him. The thing that killed Renly was a shadow that looked like Stannis Baratheon. "I don't know how she did it, but I know she had something to do with it," Robb explained. "By the time I saw it appear, I tried to warn Renly, but I was too late. When Brienne and Ser Robert tried to attack it, their swords did nothing, and they were swatted aside like flies. Only my sword was able to destroy it." Lady Olenna stepped forward. "His Grace's story matches that of Brienne and Ser Robert," she said. "But that leaves one question. How was your blade able to harm it, but not theirs?" All eyes turned to Robb, who drew his sword, holding it all for all to see. "My blade is made of Valyrian steel," he stated. The man on Mace's left spoke up now, leaning forward. He had long curly hair and a well-trimmed beard. He sat weirdly in his seat, with one leg sticking out straight. He had an ornate cane held loosely in one hand. "Valyrian steel can only be forged using dragon fire. Dragons are typically related to magic," he said, connecting the dots. "It makes sense that His Grace's sword was the only thing that could harm it." The mention of dragons triggered something in Robb's memory. "Where's my wolf?" he asked dangerously. Loras crossed his arms. "It's in the kennel," he replied. Robb was ready to strangle the pompous knight, but he checked his anger. "Release him," he ordered. "Now." Loras nodded to two guardsmen who quickly left. Robb glared at the youngest Tyrell. "I came here seeking an alliance because I thought I could work with Renly and his council. If this is how justice is dispensed in the Reach, maybe I should rethink my decision." Robb growled, glaring at the others present, as well. The men of the Reach had the decency to look ashamed of how they had allowed the Tyrell knight to act. None of them had been there when Renly's body had been discovered, and they had just followed Loras's lead, feeding off his anger and passion. Now that Robb was calling them out, they realized just how foolish they all had been. Loras went red. "You have no right to judge us, Stark," he said, seething at Robb's words. Robb glared back, not giving an inch. "We do not beat our prisoners in the north, nor do we throw unconscious men in prison before his wounds could be healed." He spat, taking a personal shot at Loras. "We do not rush justice, especially when a king has died." The Knight of Flowers glared at his sister, his eyes making it very clear that he felt betrayed. She was the only one who could have told Robb that Loras had tried to have him thrown in the dungeons, even though the young wolf had been unconscious and injured. The two guards who had been sent to free Grey Wind had returned, the giant grey wolf bounding towards its master. Robb patted his friend and protector absently while he stared around the room, having an odd feeling about something. When Grey Wind was done making sure Robb was fine, he turned towards Loras, baring his massive teeth. "No," Robb ordered softly. Grey Wind looked up at him, confused. Nevertheless, the dire wolf sat where he was, and faced Loras. Finally, Robb figured out what was different. "Where are the Lords of the Stormlands?" Lady Olenna spoke up. "The night Renly died, Stannis besieged Storm's End. The reports you fell on projected his troops and advisors. When it was confirmed that Renly was indeed dead, Stannis stopped the siege and called the Lords of the Stormlands to his banner," she said gravely. "Only a few remain now, Your Grace." "Who stayed?" Robb asked. "House Tarth and House Caron," the man with the cane answered. Robb looked at him. "I don't believe I know your name, sire," he said apologetically. The man smiled kindly. "Willis Tyrell, Your Grace," he said with a nod. "Eldest son of Lord Tyrell." Robb nodded back before turning to Lady Olenna. "Where is Stannis now?" "He's resumed his siege on Storm's End," she answered. "Renly's castellan refused to hand the castle over after news of Renly's death. His army has swelled from 5,000 to near 25,000 overnight," Willis said grimly. With that kind of strength and the royal fleet under his command, he's now a serious player in this sad affair. Not for long, Robb said, shaking his head. Renly was many things, but he did not deserve the death he got. Robb's face became hard. No man is as accursed as a kinslayer, and I mean to make those words mean something to Stannis. He then turned to Loras. You and I have been at odds ever since I arrived here, but I am offering you revenge against the man who murdered your king. Will you accept? He asked. He then addressed the rest of the Reachmen and Stormlanders. Will you all accept? Vengeance for Renly. A man stepped forward. He wore plain steel armor with a massive greatsword strapped across his back. His head was completely bald, with a gray, bristly beard covering his lower face. The expression on his face could have been made from iron. Your men call you the Young Wolf, he stated. I've studied how you have attacked the Lannisters, and the results speak for themselves. If you lead us, then House Tarly will follow. Another man stepped forward, his tabard showing the golden tree of House Rowan. He was a stout and clean-shaven man. I remember your father when he accepted our surrender at Storm's End. You remind me of him, Your Grace. House Rowan will fight with you, he promised. One by one, lords and knights stepped forward, offering their swords and men. Robb remained stoic while this happened. When all men had made their promises, Robb turned to look at House Tyrell. Lady Olenna was nodding at him with approval. Loras still looked unsure, caught between his hate for Robb and his love for Renly. Mace Tyrell just looked confused, and a little angry that his bannermen were swearing themselves to Robb. Fortunately, the issue was taken out of his hand. The second man, who sat next to Wellis, stood up and walked towards Robb. He had shaggy, close-cropped hair and a rough beard. He was tall and broad, bigger than Loras and more fit than Wellis. On his green tabard he wore 2 golden roses. My name is Garland Tyrell, second son of Lord Tyrell, he said, introducing himself when he was in front of Robb. House Tyrell has not acted its finest these past few days, I will admit. He continued loud enough for everyone to hear. Robb knew that Loras and Lord Tyrell were probably glaring at Garland for admitting they were in the wrong, but it didn't look like he cared. If you will have us, Your Grace, then House Tyrell will fight with you, to avenge Renly Baratheon, who was a friend of our house, and to rectify the wrongs done to you and your men. Robb was silent at first, although he already knew his answer. You are known as Garland the Gallant, are you not? Garland smiled slightly and nodded. An undeserved title, he said humbly. I much prefer Garland. Robb smiled as the two grasped forearms. I accept. Line break. How do you feel, Lord Stark? The Maester asked, looking over Robb's injured back. The entire area between his neck and waist was a discolored mass of bruises. Robb had no idea what it looked like. The pain he felt was unbearable. He couldn't do anything without feeling a burning pain flare up. Like I've been stampeded, Robb groaned, feeling his back stiffen up. Do you have anything to help with the pain? The Maester shook his head sadly, helping the young monarch put his shirt back on. I'm afraid all I can continue to offer is small amounts of milk of the poppy. Robb sighed and nodded, waiting as the Maester poured a small amount of the white liquid into a cup for him to drink, mixing it with a small amount of wine. He held the chalice up to Robb. Poppy wine, he explained, a Dothraki invention. It won't put you to sleep, but it will ease the pain. Robb nodded and downed the liquid. The wine tasted weird because of the milky white substance in it, but he drank it regardless, instantly feeling the effects of the poppy coursing through his back, causing the pain to grow numb. Robb handed the chalice back to the Maester. Thank you, he said. Do you know when I'll be able to fight again? The Maester shook his head. Weeks, he said firmly. Your back needs time to heal. I understand you are at war, but the more you can rest, the better. I would also advise you to go about in just clothing for a time, Your Grace. Your armor would put too much strain on your back. Robb sighed but nodded. Thank you, Maester. The man nodded and went to leave, but the door opened before he got it. It was Garland, who looked slightly out of breath. The second son of Mace Tyrell nodded briefly to the Maester before looking at Robb. An emissary from King's Landing, Your Grace, he said. My father and Willis are meeting with him now. Robb nodded and grabbed his sword as well as the walking staff that had been found for him, and followed Garland out of the room, the two walking quickly towards the Lord Solar. Had Lady Olenna been told? Robb asked curiously, doing his best to keep up with the other man. Garland nodded. She has. Willis only told me when he was being dragged into the meeting. Robb raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? Garland sighed. Willis and I are afraid of what our father might agree to, he admitted. He's a good man, but when he thinks he's doing right by our house, it never seems to go well. It didn't take long for the two men to reach the Lord Solar, hearing talking coming from inside. Garland nodded at both the guards and opened the door, interrupting the meeting going on inside. Mace Tyrell, flanked by Willis, sat across from another man. He was short, with a slender build and sharp features. Streaks of gray ran through his black hair, though the pointed beard on his chin remained untouched. He was dressed in fine gray clothing and had a small bird pin on his chest. Garland? Mace asked, standing up. What are you doing here? This is a private meeting. I asked him to grab our guest, Willis said. I thought King Robb here should hear what Lord Baelish has to say. Mace went a little red but managed to keep his composure. Well, all right, he said finally, retaking his seat. Robb looked at the new man, nodding his head. I understand you come from King's Landing. The man bowed. Patir Baelish, your grace, Master of Coin, he said, introducing himself. Otherwise known as Littlefinger. Someone said from the doorway. Lady Olenna hobbled in, flanked by her twin giants as always. When she entered, she shot a glare towards her son before looking back at Baelish. I assume you are here to ask my family to pledge their loyalty to Joffrey. Baelish nodded. As always, my lady, you are very perceptive. Olenna waved aside the compliment. Save your breath, I've heard compliments from hundreds of men and I do not need yours. Say what you came here to say. King Joffrey has instructed me to ask that Lord Tyrell and the Reach pledge their loyalty to him as the true of Westeros. In return, his grace will place aside his betrothal with Sansa Stark for your daughter, Lady Margaery, he said, looking at Mace. The Lord of Highgarden's eyes lit up when the marriage to King Joffrey was mentioned, but before he could speak, his mother beat him to the punch. I am afraid you have arrived a day too late, my lord. My granddaughter is already betrothed to Robb Stark, and the Reach has declared its loyalty to him as king in the north. Lady Olenna snapped. Mace's face went from excitement to confusion as he looked from Baelish to his mother to Robb, who was gazing evenly at the Queen of Thorns, who kept her gaze on Baelish. Willis spoke up now. My grandmother is right. My sister is promised to the king in the north. Baelish raised an eyebrow. That was rather quick, he commented innocently. Such is the way of war, Lord Baelish, Robb said. Littlefinger looked at Robb, a pleasant smile spreading across his face. Do you know I grew up with your mother and uncle in Riverrun? Robb nodded. So I've heard, but I also remember that you challenged my uncle Brandon for her hand, and you lost, he pointed out. Baelish raised an eyebrow at Robb's unwelcoming tone. Surely, your grace, we can be civil. Robb frowned. Forgive me, my lord, but anyone who serves Joffrey in any aspect is my enemy. The boy killed my father and holds my sisters hostage. You will find very little civility from me. Baelish nodded. Of course, he said. Well, I can see that this is a lost cause. I will take my leave, he said, bowing to Lord Mace and Robb before leaving the room. When the man was gone, Olenna closed the door and glared at her son. Mace, what on earth were you thinking? The Lord of Highgarden shifted in his seat. I thought it would be best to hear the man out, he said, trying to get away from the old woman's stern gaze. The Queen of Thorns scoffed. Don't lie to me, Mace. You knew very well what the man would offer. You thought you could put Margaery on the throne and pull our support from the Starks, she hissed. Thankfully, Willis had the good sense to send for me and King Robb to save you from making a mistake. Mace sat upright. I had no such intention, he argued. Whether it was your intention or not, my lord, Baelish has his answer now, Robb said, showing a little more respect to the man than Olenna was. And it seems I am to marry your daughter. Olenna shrugged. It was more so to convince Baelish to bugger off, she said. But the possibility is not improbable. My informants tell me that Edmure Tully has married Rosalind Frey, the woman you were supposed to marry. You are now a free man, your grace. Robb raised his eyebrow. Curious, he said. He looked towards Mace, who still looked a little confused with the whole ordeal. If no one has any objections, I would be more than happy to take Margaery as my wife. Willis grinned and got up from his seat, holding out a hand. Then I'll be the first to congratulate you, your grace, he said, grasping arms with Robb. Though I must warn you, the rose has thorns. And brothers, Garland added with a mock growl, before smiling and taking Robb's arm as well. We'd be happy to have you as a good brother. Robb grinned, looking at both men before turning his gaze to Lord Mace, who was still sitting. My lord, you are her father. I would like your opinion. Mace looked at Robb, his gold-brown eyes meeting Robb's blue ones. After a moment, he nodded. I would be happy to have you as my good son, he said, rising from his seat. At least I know she will be happy with a man of honor, he said, offering his hand as well. Robb grasped his arm. I swear I will treat her right, my lord. Mace nodded, a small smile coming to his chubby face. I know, your grace, you Starks are truly one of a kind. Catelyn II. Castle Serwyn was a welcome sight for the Lady of Winterfell and her small retinue of guards. The seat of House Serwyn was a half a day's ride from Winterfell, but it was nearly dark and Ser Roderick felt it was best to spend the night at the small castle before finishing the journey home the next morning. You're almost home, my lady, the old knight said happily. One more day of riding. Catelyn gave the knight a small smile. It was a little action, but extremely important because it was one of the first times she's smiled since leaving Riverrun. The deaths of her husband and father weighed heavily on the Lady of Winterfell. She had spent nights in the Sept at Riverrun, praying for answers from the Seven. She didn't know what to do and felt lost emotionally and spiritually. It was then that she realized that she needed to go home, her true home in Winterfell. The South had brought her nothing but heartache. Seeing her son grow into a man and see him become as beloved by his bannermen as his father was a small moment of happiness in an otherwise dark time. That's why she had sought out Jon Snow. She always had her doubts about the boy, but she couldn't deny that he loved his half-siblings. Catelyn would do anything to save her son, but since she was going back north, she needed to know that there was someone with Robb who would give everything to keep him safe. That's why she made Jon swear to her that he would keep her son safe from harm. I've been away from my children for far too long, Catelyn said quietly. I'm sure Master Luwin has kept them well in hand, Roderick said confidently. Besides, Lord Bran has always been a smart boy. Winterfell is safe under his watch. Catelyn nodded. Thank you for your words, Sir Roderick. They are very kind. The knight nodded as the small group made their way into the castle courtyard, where a young man was waiting to receive the Lady of Winterfell. Clay Serwyn was a little older than Robb, but Catelyn remembered meeting the boy several times. He had always been a pleasant young man who got along well with the Stark children. When Catelyn dismounted, the man bowed deeply. My lady, welcome to Castle Serwyn. We are at your service. Catelyn smiled softly, walking up to the young Northman. Clay Serwyn, it has been some time since we've last met, she said kindly. Clay smiled as he stood up. Aye, but you haven't aged a day. My lady, he nodded to Ser Roderick. Ser Roderick, well met. The Northern Knight nodded back. My lord. The young Northerner frowned. My lady, I wish to express my deepest condolences for the death of Lord Stark. He was a great man who didn't deserve his death. He was no traitor. Catelyn's smile wavered for a second. Thank you for your words. God's willing, his death will be avenged and my daughters will finally be returned to me. Clee nodded. We've had rooms prepared for you and your men, my lady. Please, this way, he said, offering his arm. Catelyn smiled and took the young man's arm, walking with him through the castle. I trust you haven't had much trouble here in the north, she said, making conversation. Clee's face darkened. I wish I could say that was true, my lady, he said grimly. All pleasantness was gone from the young man. There have been reports from Flint's Finger that longships have been seen off Cape Kraken. Catelyn raised an eyebrow. The Ironborn? Clee nodded. Indeed, Bowen Hawker has called all castles on the western coast, specifically Deepwood Motta and Bear Island, to prepare for the worst. I am preparing a small host of my own in case reinforcements are needed. Catelyn frowned. My son sent Theon to the Iron Islands in hopes of allying with the Ironborn. Clee sighed. It seems his grace's hopes shattered in the worst way possible. The Ironborn are coming north in force, and we are left with our breeches down around our ankles, he said angrily. We are doing all we can to prepare our defenses. Catelyn turned to look at Sir Roderick, who was following the two. Sir Roderick, how many men can Winterfell raise? The old knight thought for a moment before answering. A few hundred, my lady. King Robb left a strong garrison before he went south. When we return to Winterfell, I want ravens sent across the north to rally what men they can, she ordered. Sir Roderick nodded. It will be done, my lady. Have faith, Lady Stark. Bowen Hawker will keep those bastards at bay. He's been fighting the Ironborn for years. Clay said confidently. Catelyn nodded. Indeed, the Hawkers have always had a talent for war. However, with my son in the south, we must be extra vigilant in defending our home. Clay smiled. Of course, my lady, he said, stopping in front of a door. Here we are. If you need anything, please do not hesitate to ask. My home is open to you. Catelyn smiled. Thank you, my lord. Your hospitality is most appreciated. House Stark has been nothing but good to my family. I would be remiss if I did not return the favor when given the opportunity. Clay responded proudly. With you leave, he said, bowing to Catelyn and nodding to Ser Roderick before leaving. Catelyn sighed. It seems the war has made its way north, she said sadly. Ser Roderick nodded. Unfortunately, my lady, but I feel confident we will be able to send the Ironborn back to their island soon enough. Without their ships, they are weak. Catelyn nodded. I hope you're right, Ser Roderick. Line break. When Catelyn walked into the hall the next morning to break her fast, she found Ser Roderick and Clay Serwyn standing at the high table, looking down at a map. The heir to Sarwyn Castle was in full armor and looked extremely angry. Catelyn walked up to them. My lord, Ser Roderick. What's happened? Clay looked up, bowing his head when Catelyn approached. Foul news, my lady. The Ironborn has attacked the north, he said grimly. The Iron Victory has been seen heading towards Torrens Square, and another fleet of ships was seen just off Sea Dragon Point. Ser Roderick and I believe that they intend to attack Deepwood and Bear Island. What happened to Captain Hawker? Catelyn asked. He was somehow dragged south, my lady, Ser Roderick said sadly. The entire Hawker fleet, the western coast, is now completely undefended. Catelyn crossed her arms in front of her. What are we doing to repel the invaders? I have 300 men ready to march as of right now, Clay said strongly. I have also sent word to Lord Wyman Manderley asking him to gather what men he can and send them to Winterfell. It's the best possible place to rally men in the north. When we return to Winterfell, I will send ravens to Last Hearth, Tarhold, and the Dreadfort. We'll rendezvous at Winterfell with the men of White Harbor and drive out the invaders. Ser Roderick added, Have ravens been sent to the castles that are about to be attacked? Catelyn asked. Clay nodded. Bowden sent ravens to the entire western coast, even as far as Winterfell and here. They'll be as prepared as they can be, but this is not just a small raid, my lady. This is the Iron Fleet. It's an invasion. Has word been sent to Riverrun? Catelyn asked. Roderick shook his head. We'll have to send that raven when we return to Winterfell, my lady. But I have full confidence we'll see the raiders off. Their true strength comes from the sea. Catelyn frowned. I admire your confidence, Ser Roderick, but I still want a raven sent to Riverrun. The other northern lords deserve to know that their home is being attacked. Clee nodded. Of course, my lady. We'll be leaving soon, my lady. I will go make sure the lads are ready to go, Ser Roderick said, leaving the hall. Clay watched him. I am glad to have him back in the north, my lady. King Robb took a lot of our best commanders south with him, he said grimly. Ser Roderick might be our best chance at repelling the invaders. Catelyn nodded. Hopefully we can see them away soon. I did not leave one war zone to enter another. Clay smiled. As Ser Roderick said, the Ironborn are only strong on their boats. They'll soon see that it was a mistake to attack the north. Line break. Bowen Hawker. Captain, we've lost sight of them, a sailor called down from the topmast. He was a squirrel-like man with a good head for heights and great climbing skills. The man he called down to was a good head taller than him, with broad shoulders and long dark hair that was pulled back in a tight knot. He was garbed in a plated leather over ringmail. At his side was a heavy-bladed cutlass across from a throwing axe. Bowen Hawker looked like a mirror image of his brother, with only a few slight differences in their hair and clothing. Other than that, their mannerisms and facial features were nearly identical. Both had dark, stone-like eyes and menacing scowls, along with square jaws and sharp, aquiline noses. Come down, Tom, Bowen called up to the small man. Master Jern, let's get the fleet turned around and go north. Aye, Captain. The first mate called before he began bellowing orders to the rest of the crew. As the sailors ran around preparing for the ship to turn, the barrel-chested man called for the colored lanterns to be lit and shown to the nearest ships. Bowen and his other captains used red and green flags and lanterns to tell other ships what direction to turn and what direction they had to be headed. Currently, the Seahawk signaler was telling other ships to turn to the port side and head north. The commander of the Western Fleet met with his first mate by the tiller, looking out over his ship. Like any captain, he took immense pride in his ship. She was massive compared to the other galleys in the fleet, with a combined 300 oars, but she was still sleek enough to outrun any ship in the Sunset Sea. "We've been fooled, Jern," Bowen said quietly, though his tone gave away how disappointed the man was. "Captain?" the first mate asked. "What we saw wasn't the Iron Fleet," Bowen explained. "Captain, I recognized at least 10 of those ships from the rebellion. That was the Iron Fleet. I'd swear my life on it," Jern answered. Bowen shook his head. "That was part of the Iron Fleet, probably a third of her strength. Not to mention the Iron Victory wasn't with them." Bowen knew the infamous Longship by sight. He had faced off against Victarion many times when they were both young men, earning their spurs. Balon's brother had attempted to raid the Stony Shore many times, always to be repelled by Bowen and the Seahawk. Everything the Hawker man knew of the Ironborn and their tactics came from those skirmishes against Victarion. "Where are they, Captain?" Jern asked. "Attacking the north," Bowen growled. "Balon the Bugger sent Gorold Goodbrother to distract me and drag the fleet south while the rest of the ships got around us." "Captain, how do you know all this?" Bowen's face darkened. "Because it's what I would do," he said grimly. "I recognized the Stonehammer Lord Goodbrother's ship." The first mate still looked very confused. He had served on the Seahawk for over a decade, first signing on as a deckhand and working his way up to the first mate. He knew his captain like few did, but he had never heard him like this before. Bowen recognized the confused look. A good captain and commander must know two things: his ship and his enemies. "I knew my ship, but when Bowen put a bloody crown on his head, I didn't know my enemy. I've spent the last decade learning about the Lords of the Iron Islands. I know their ships, their sigils, their family tree." "So what will we do, Captain?" Jern asked. Before Bowen could answer, a sailor ran up to Bowen, nodding briefly to the captain before launching into his report. "Captain, we have a northern wind and the waves are against us." Bowen nodded. "Understood. Back to your post," he ordered. Jern stepped forward now. "Right, lads. Time for some real work. Run out the oars. Coral, call time. Harker, get those sails down. Turner, Boris, tie down anything loose." The deck once again became a flurry of activity as men ran to do the first mate's orders. With a clatter of wood that sounded like multiple lumberjacks at work, 100 oars were pushed out at either side. Bowen rarely used all 300 rowers on his ship, not unless he absolutely had to. "Ready!" Coral bellowed from his lead rower position. "Row! Row!" The large ship stopped for just a moment, as the sail was pulled down and the oars were put out. But now the ship was moving again, increasing in speed as the timing was set, and the sailors cleared their heads of everything except the action of rowing and the call. Bowen left the main deck and entered his personal cabin. Everything in the room was nailed down. There was nothing loose, but there wasn't much to begin with. The cabin was sparsely furnished. There was a desk, 3 chairs, and a couple of chests. Besides that, there was absolutely nothing else in the room. His maps were kept in a long, low chest behind the desk, a heavy steel lock keeping the box shut. They were Bowen's most prized possessions that he had spent almost 2 decades tracking down. He had maps of Westeros and each of the 7 kingdoms, Essos, and the Free Cities. He even had maps of Slaver's Bay, the Smoking Sea, and as far as Yeti and Ashai. If there was a sea, Bowen had a map of it. He pulled out his map of the north, checking his notes on constellations and sea conditions. From what he saw, he was just south of the Flint Cliffs. In his urgency of chasing what he thought was the Iron Fleet, he had left the north free to invasion. Bowen put the map away, locked the chest, and made his way back to the tiller. Jern's face was drawn in concentration as he read the sundial and the wind pennant. "We are just south of the Flint Cliffs," Bowen said sourly. "How quickly can we reach Blazewater Bay?" "I don't know, Captain," Jern answered. "I can't tell when the wind will pick back up. The waves are also slowing us down. If we continue rowing." "Another day," Jern grunted, heaving on the tiller to keep the ship on track. "Hopefully once we round Cape Kraken we'll have the wind again. We can't keep the men rowing with our current rations." "Get us to Blazewater Bay, Jern," Bowen ordered. "We'll resupply at Barrowtown if we need to. And if the Ironborn have taken the town, then we'll kill them all and resupply," Bowen said simply. To him, the only good Ironborn was a dead one. Theon the Theon sat on an overturned crate, munching on an apple as his raiders finished stripping the village of anything of importance, which was nothing. They had attacked in the early dawn when everyone was still asleep, landing on the shores of the island and cutting down everyone in their path, grabbing women and children for salt wives and thralls. Theon had led his men on the raid but did not actively participate in the thieving or raping. He had cut down 2 men, but all he had done after was stand in the middle of the village and watch the massacre. The raid hadn't lasted long. Those who weren't captured or killed ran north towards Mormont Keep, most likely to get help, but Theon knew it would be no use. The Mormonts had always been one of the poorer houses of the north, and most of their warriors were in the south with Mage and Daisy Mormont. Theon had over 500 raiders with him, 8 ships full of men. Surely more than whatever force the Mormonts can put together. Dagmer grunted as he sat down next to Theon, slapping him on the back. The master-at-arms of Pike was an old, stout man with snow-white hair and beard. His fingers were adorned with an assortment of rings, all of which he earned through the iron price. A nasty scar split both his lips in 2, the result of when a long axe had nearly killed him as a child. Hence the name Cleftjaw. Not bad, boy, he grunted, flicking the blood from his axe. All we got left is the castle. Shouldn't be too hard if the poor fools fight like they just did. We're not taking the castle, Theon said, shaking his head. It's not worth our time. Dagmer raised an eyebrow. Your father said, he began, but Theon cut him off. I know damn well what my father said, but I was raised in the north. My father wasn't. Theon snapped. I am telling you, the island isn't worth our time. Look at what we got here. Salted pork, fish, and shitty furs. What do you think the castle has? I'll save you the time. Fuck all. Dagmer huffed. Then what are we going to do? Theon looked down at his boots, thinking for a moment before he answered. There's a castle a couple of miles inland, past Deepwood Motte. It'll be undefended. And what castle would that be, nephew? The Damfair asked, walking up to Theon and Dagmer. Behind the priest stood his drowned men, a group of fanatics who were just as dedicated to the drowned god as the Damfair was. They all looked the same. Seaweed wrapped, salt-stained hair and beards. Rough clothing that had been dyed blue, green, and brown. They each carried a heavy staff and wore animal skins full of seawater by their sides. They weren't warriors per se, but they still played their part in the raid. Winterfell, Theon said, looking up at his uncle. With my sister attacking Deepwood Motte and my uncle taking Torrhen Square, reinforcements will come from Winterfell, leaving the castle undefended. I guarantee it. How in the blazes are you planning on getting there, boy? The Damfair asked. We'll have to march through the Wolfwood, but I know the way, Theon said. Winterfell has 10 times the riches this barren speck of rock has. Father wants to get his revenge on the Starks, then why not take their damn castle? Dagmer smiled, showing his approval for the plan. He clapped Theon on the back once again. Not a bad plan, boy. Theon looked at the Damfair, who still looked hesitant with Theon's plan. Uncle, you don't have to come, he said. I'll take my crew and Cleftjaws and head inland. You stay on the stony shore and raid the fishing villages there. Aeron frowned. You're risking much, nephew. The Theon stood up, standing chest to chest with Uncle. My father told you to watch me, Uncle. I am not a fucking boy still in his small clothes. If you want to stay here and try to take the bloody castle, then stay. I am going to take Winterfell and show my father that I am Ironborn. He growled before shouldering his way past his uncle. Men, let's go. What about the castle? One man called, pointing towards the trail that led to Mormont Keep. Fuck it, Theon called back. We have a much bigger prize to take. What's that? Another raider asked. Theon looked at the raider, glancing at the others who were all looking at him as well. Winterfell. Line break. The fishing village was much like the one Theon and his men had just raided. A little over a dozen huts huddled together around one meeting area. The huts looked more like shacks, weather-stained wood with thatch and mud roofs. A couple of jetties reached out into the ocean, where the fishing boats were kept. Little 1 or 2 man dinghies that could only go out so far before the big waves sunk it. It was a sad, sleepy little village that was similar to all the others that dotted the stony shore. The families that lived there had been there for generations and would stay for generations later. Theon crouched on his ship, his eyes just above the bulwark. Behind him, his men crouched as well, exchanging fierce grins with each other. This was their way of life, taking what they want from unsuspecting and helpless people through the iron price. Why make what you want when you can just take it from someone who already has? When he judged that they were close enough, Theon stood up a little, still trying to remain hidden behind the side of the ship, and slid his sword from its sheath. The others shifted a little as well, making sure their weapons were at the ready. Theon looked to his left and right, making sure that Dagmar and the Damphair were still with him. He had sent his other 5 ships down the coast to another village with orders to raid it and then meet back up with the Damphair. From there they would head further south and join Victarion at Torrhen Square. When Theon felt the hull run up onto the sand, he leaped feet first over the side, spraying water as he landed in the shallows. "Come on, lads!" Theon shouted, rushing towards the village. A massive roar came from the ship as the Ironborn came ashore, following their captain towards the village, waving their axes and swords in the air. Soon their roar was matched by their fellow raiders as the other 2 ships hit land. Theon cut down the first man he saw, his sword carving through the man from shoulder to hip. He was an older man with wispy white hair and weather-tanned skin, craggy and creased from years at sea. He had a short bow in his hand and a quiver of poorly made arrows on his back. He wasn't even wearing armor. He never stood a chance. Theon strode to the village center, watching the chaos and carnage around him, feeling more than a little ashamed at what he was doing. Not for the first time since he had left Pike, he wondered how he ended up where he was. Raiding the north, killing its people, betraying Robb. It was all very confusing to Theon, but it never stopped him from trying to prove to his father and himself that he was Ironborn. A war horn sounded in the distance as a company of horsemen burst from the tree line 100 yards from the village, riding full pelt towards the invading Ironborn. They wore chainmail and leather, and a few looked to have rabbit hides wrapped around their war spears. One of the riders held a banner bearing the 3 trees of House Tallheart, masters of Torrhen Square. "On me!" Theon roared. "Archers!" The raiders responded to Theon's call, forming a shield wall on his position as the archers began to fire at the charging cavalry. At first, their arrows thudded into the shields the enemy wore. Dagmar fixed that. "Aim for their horses, you cunts!" he shouted, marching up next to Theon, his axe dripping blood. "Bring down their bloody horses." Soon the cavalry began to thin as riders went down in an explosion of sand and horse. When they hit Theon and his men, there were no more than 20 of them, less than half of those who had emerged from the trees. They killed many of Theon's men. The Ironborn wore boiled leather and chainmail, which wasn't much protection against castle-forged steel, but the horsemen were horribly outnumbered. Riders were pulled from the saddle and thrown onto the sand, having the wind driven from their bodies. But the discomfort didn't last long, as they usually found multiple raiders jumped on them with dirks and hand axes. One of the last men to be pulled from his horse was a young man, tall and broad-shouldered, with an abnormally thick neck. Theon recognized him instantly, as he had made fun of the boy on multiple occasions in the past. "Wait!" Theon shouted, stopping the Ironborn raider from killing the man. He walked up to the group as the man's helm was torn from his head. "Benfred Tallheart, you stupid fool." The young warrior narrowed his eyes as he glared at Theon, the hate radiating off him almost palpable. "Theon bloody Greyjoy, you traitorous fuck," he growled. "When I heard the Ironborn were coming north, I should have known you would be leading them." Theon glared at the young noble. "These are my people, Benfred. Where else would I be?" "Lord Stark raised you as his own," Benfred roared. "Robb treated you like a brother and this is how you repay him. Theon Greyjoy? Ha! Theon Turncloak." Theon leveled his sword at Benfred's throat, glaring at the northerner. "Watch your tongue. I am the heir to Pike. You are a traitor, but I expected nothing less from a bloody Greyjoy," Benfred said, spitting at Theon. "I hope Robb cuts out your heart and feeds it to his wolf, you fucker. You never belonged in the north." The Theon smacked the man with the flat of his blade, leaving a nasty cut on the boy's cheek. "Who is leading the northern reinforcements?" Benfred remained silent, spitting at Theon once again. Once more Theon hit the man with the flat of his blade, cutting him in the cheek. "How many men are they leading?" Theon asked again. "You will not leave the north alive, traitor," Benfred growled. Theon growled and clubbed the young noble in the head. Benfred rocked back from the force of the blow, but the 2 raiders holding him kept him still. Theon turned to his uncle, who was watching the altercation with a neutral expression. "Have him drowned," Theon ordered. Era nodded and gestured for a couple of his fanatics to grab the northerner, who struggled mightily against his captors, but to no avail. He was dragged down to the beach and into the waves, the drowned men not stopping till they were knee-deep in water. That's when they shoved Benfred's head into the water, holding it there. The young man tried to fight back, his shoulders and arms shaking violently, until they suddenly went slack in the hands of the drowned men. The priests kept the head underwater for a little while longer, until they were sure that the boy was dead. They shoved the boy into the water, watching as the waves took him away to the drowned god. Theon watched the death with a neutral look on his face, stunned with himself that he had just had the boy drowned. He remembered meeting the boy several times in the past when Sir Helman Tallheart would visit Winterfell or when Lord Stark would visit Torrhen Square. He had always mocked the boy for the size of his neck, trying to see how angry he could get the boy. Now Benfred Tallheart was dead, and Theon had been the one to order his death. There was no turning back now, not for Theon. Benfred was right. History would no longer know him as Theon Greyjoy, ward to House Stark and heir to Pike. He would be known as Theon the Turncloak, the man who broke his oath to the king in the north and attacked his former home. A traitor. Tyrion IV. When Littlefinger walked into the small council chambers, all eyes were on him in an instant. As usual, he refused to drop the blasted smirk from his face. Even when facing the collective glare of both Tyrion and Cersei, the man never showed an ounce of remorse or fear. When he took his seat, the room was ominously quiet. "You had one job, Lord Baelish," Tyrion sighed, cradling a chalice of wine in his hands. "Bring the Tyrells to our side and we win the fucking war." Baelish put his hands together on the table. "I was under the impression from our esteemed Master of Whispers that Robb Stark would be incapacitated," he explained. "Unfortunately, he was all but—" Cersei turned her glare on Varys. "Lord Varys, Lord Baelish does have a point. You said the Stark boy had a broken back." "I believe I said it was a rumor," Varys said, defending himself. "So much for your little birds," Cersei muttered. "What else did you learn, Lord Baelish?" Tyrion asked, turning the conversation back to the Tyrells. Baelish sighed. "I thought I was meeting with Lord Mace and his heir, Willis. Turns out the heir is smarter than the father." "Not a surprise," Tyrion grumbled. Olenna Tyrell's intelligence apparently skipped over her son and went to her eldest grandson. Baelish nodded. "Indeed. Our meeting was interrupted by the arrival of Ser Garland Tyrell and Robb Stark himself. Apparently, the day before I arrived, the Reach pledged themselves to the king in the north." "Traitors," Cersei hissed. "Furthermore, when the Queen of Thorns entered the room, I learned that not only did the Reach pledge their loyalty to the Northern King, but Mace Tyrell's daughter is set to marry him." Baelish continued, ignoring the Queen. Tyrion sighed and leaned back in his seat. "How fucking perfect," he said. "Now we have a host of enemies to our north, and a host of enemies to our south. And we are stuck in a hungry, impoverished city, with our only hope of victory stuck in the ruins of Harrenhal." "I do not believe Robb Stark will march on the capital," Varys said. "Why wouldn't he?" Cersei scoffed. "We have nothing to stop the boy." "My little birds," Varys began. "Stop with your fucking birds," Cersei hissed. "We've seen how reliable they are." Varys made a vague gesture. "Forgive me, your grace, but my little birds are not infallible. This, however, is true. Robb Stark has convinced the Reachmen that Stannis Baratheon is to blame for Renly's death." "That would be kinslaying," Pycelle gasped. "What proof did the boy have that Stannis committed the crime?" Tyrion asked. "He said it was blood magic performed by the priestess that the man now has by his side," Varys explained, his face darkening slightly as he mentioned blood magic. "Blood magic is nonsense," Pycelle grumbled. "Charlatan trickery." Varys glared at the old maester, his perfectly controlled facade breaking for just a moment. "I assure you, Grand Maester, blood magic is very real," he said, his voice deadly serious. "My little birds have since fled Dragonstone, but the last ones told me that Stannis is now firmly under her control." "Stannis is not a godly man," Tyrion pointed out. "Whatever control this priestess has over the man, I'm sure it's not as bad as it may seem. He's burned the sept and all the statues of the Seven." Varys deadpanned. "His banner is now a black stag and a flaming heart. He has been converted to the Lord of Light. There is no denying it." Baelish rolled his eyes while Cersei drained the last of what was in her goblet. Tyrion swished the wine in his glass thoughtfully. "So Renly is dead. What's happened to the Stormlander lords?" "They've gone over to Stannis. He now has over 25,000 men outside of Storm's End," Varys answered. Tyrion nodded slowly. You said Stark pointed the finger at Stannis. You think he's going to attack Stannis to avenge the younger Baratheon? Varys nodded. I wouldn't put it past the king in the north. He is his father's son. Neither would I. Tyrion agreed. Keep an eye on the boy. I will send a raven to my father at Harrenhal. He needs to know that the odds are greatly stacked against us. That will be all for now, my lords, Cersei said, stopping the meeting dead in its tracks. The other members of the council glanced between the siblings, but followed the Queen Regent's order, putting their papers in order before filing out of the room, leaving the two Lannisters alone. As always, dear sister, you are as sweet as honey, Tyrion muttered, taking a drink of his wine. Shut up, Cersei snapped. As much as I hate to see the Stark boy gain more power than he had any right to have, I am pleased to see your clever little plot fall apart in front of your eyes. Tyrion raised an eyebrow. My clever little plot? And what would that be? You tried to sell my son off like some piece of livestock. Cersei snarled. He is the king of Westeros. Tyrion scoffed. I hadn't noticed, he said. Oh, and as of right now he is the king of the Crown Lands and the Westerlands. Well, half of them, that is. We would be winning this war if father would finally move and attack the Starks and Tullys, Cersei said, leaning forward. Instead, he sits on his ass in some ruin, watching the war happen around him. In case you haven't noticed, father is a little preoccupied trying to win the war your son started, Tyrion argued. Besides, if father goes north, who's gonna protect the capital from our enemies to the south? Varys just said that the Stark boy is going into the Stormlands with the army of the Reach. The northern host is without its leader, Cersei said. Tyrion propped his head on his hand, regarding his sister. You do know how many men the Reach can field, don't you? Cersei frowned in confusion. 100,000, she answered. Tyrion nodded. 100,000 men with swords and spears and bows, who would like very much to kill you and me and father and your son, the king of Westeros, as you say. Tyrion explained, if father goes north, then all the Stark boy has to do is split the current force he now controls, which he is more than capable of doing. He has the numbers, and the commanders I might add, to completely overwhelm Stannis Baratheon and attack King's Landing, while father is stuck in the Riverlands trying to deal with the northern host. Cersei glared at Tyrion, knowing that he had just scored a point in their verbal battle. Even you must admit, in your little brain, that father must do something, Cersei said finally. Tyrion nodded. I do, but that is not to say that father is doing nothing, he said. With the number of allies that the Stark boy now has, do you believe that they are all getting along? Cersei shook her head. Exactly, Tyrion continued. Robb Stark is not a god, nor a werewolf as the singers like to believe. He is a boy who has stunned the realm. That does not mean that he is perfect. He has a weakness, and that is currently being exploited. Cersei frowned. What are you talking about? Tyrion raised a message that he had in front of him, passing it to his sister. Before you sent our little band of friends away, we never got to talk about what is happening in the north. Cersei read the message, looking back at her brother. The Ironborn have invaded the north. Tyrion nodded, snatching the message back from her. Indeed, the Stark boy sent Balon's son back to him in the hopes of creating an alliance with the Iron Islands. Robb Stark has just learned a hard lesson. Never trust a Greyjoy, Tyrion said. And now his people are bleeding because of it. Stupid boy, Cersei said idly. Tyrion nodded, taking another drink of wine. Yes, it seems that the Stark boy is capable of making a mistake after all, he said. Now, the northern lords will not stand by while their homeland is attacked. Not for all the gold in the rock. They'll go home, Cersei said, a light of hope shining in her eyes. Tyrion nodded. Exactly. Robb Stark's most ardent supporters will march on home, leaving the boy with a large army and no support base. The boy still has 100,000 men, Cersei commented. We need allies. Tyrion grinned slightly. Why, dear sister, that might be the smartest thing you've said since I arrived in this terrible place, he said, taking a small amount of pleasure getting under his sister's skin. You're right, we need allies, and I believe I might know where to find them. Cersei raised a languid eyebrow. Would you be so kind as to inform me? She asked dryly. The Vale has been oddly quiet, Tyrion said. I rather expected them to immediately join the Stark boy in going after Joffrey's head, but they haven't. Varys tells me that Lady Lysa is remaining neutral. I then asked our Master of Whispers to find me everything he could on the Lady of the Vale, and he came back with some rather interesting rumors. Cersei huffed. I fail to see why you're talking about that woman. Patience is a virtue, Tyrion chuckled. The reason I am talking about Lysa Tully is because Petyr Baelish grew up with her in Riverrun. Did you know that? No, you probably didn't. It's beneath you to know such information. There's even a rumor spread by Baelish himself that he took both Tully girls' maidenhoods. Get to the point, Cersei growled. Tyrion rolled his eyes. Sweet as vinegar, he muttered, amending his previous statement. We can send Lord Baelish to the Vale to make an alliance of our own. The Vale Lords will never ally with us. Ned Stark grew up in the Vale. Cersei pointed out. Tyrion nodded. Correct. But when their lady said that they would remain neutral, they did. Even when their dear Ned Stark had his head chopped off. If Lady Lysa ordered them to attack the Starks and Tullys, I am willing to bet that a number of them would obey. Cersei tapped her finger on the table thoughtfully, looking towards the wall. After a few moments of thinking, she looked back at her brother. Do you think it'll work? She asked, all the venom in her voice gone. Tyrion knew that. At her core, Cersei was a woman who was driven by her instincts to protect her children and those she cares about. If there was even a slight chance to win the war, she was willing to try it. The acting hand to the king nodded. It won't hurt to try. We need friends to win this war. If this doesn't work, we will have to look elsewhere. Where? Cersei asked. Across the narrow sea, Tyrion sighed. We can hire a few sellsword companies. But we're in debt, Cersei pointed out. Tyrion shrugged. Father has an account with the Iron Bank. More than enough to pay for 1 or 2 companies. Perhaps the Golden Company. 10,000 trained sellswords. That would be nice. Cersei nodded, standing up. I'll go inform the king of what is happening. I hear you already found a replacement for Ser Preston Greenfield. Tyrion mused, stopping his sister. Cersei nodded slowly. I did, Sir Osmond Kettleback. Tyrion sighed. You know the Kingsguard are supposed to be the best knights in all the realm, he said, a slight hint of annoyance in the small man's voice. Not the Queen's lackeys. Cersei was seething. They are not. Meryn Trant, Boros Blount, Osmond Kettleback, Tyrion said, cutting off his sister. These are not knights, they are your informants. Put in the Kingsguard for little political gain. Make your point, Cersei hissed. If we win this war, we need to change many things. Tyrion pressed. The small council and the Kingsguard to start. Why would we do such a thing? Cersei asked. Robert did just fine with these men. Robert was fine because he was known as the men who destroyed the Targaryen dynasty and tore the crown from Balon Greyjoy's bloody head, Tyrion countered. He also had Jon Arryn to rule the realm for him, and he still managed to drive his fucking kingdom in millions of debt. Tyrion stopped himself, taking a deep breath before he continued at a more reasonable tone. Joffrey is not his father. He does not have Robert's charisma, nor has he earned a reputation at the battlefield. He will need great protection and loyal and smart men on his council. Tyrion explained. Let's be generous here, Cersei. Joffrey does not want to rule. He enjoys the power that comes from the crown on his head. Father won't care because as soon as the war is done and he takes his place as hand, the realm will be ruled by him. Cersei looked like she wanted to argue, but didn't. The two siblings knew what their father was like. He kept the realm together for decades, while Aerys Targaryen fell to madness next to him. He more than anyone would be able to keep Joffrey in line and bring the realm back to stability. What do you have in mind? Cersei asked finally. Baelish, Varys, we must keep an eye on them. Them and many others will be like rats from a sinking ship if Robb Stark beats Father. Tyrion said, keep his voice low. Father won't let the Stark boy win, but if we can get some evidence that shows if either of them are helping our enemies or anyone else for that matter, we can get rid of them and fill their spots with men more capable, more loyal men. Cersei nodded slowly. I will think about it, she said finally, walking out. Cersei, Tyrion called after his sister, causing her to turn. Try to keep Joffrey from beating Lady Sansa again, would you? Cersei glared at her brother before sweeping out of the room. Tyrion watched her go. The acting hand of the king drained the last of his wine and hopped off his chair. He needed to go see shit. Robb 12. I wasn't expecting to see you again, Lord Stark, Stannis said, sitting stiffly on his charger. Something was wrong with the last Baratheon brother. He was constantly shifting and wincing in his saddle, seemingly in a lot of pain. Robb glared at the man. Here I am. Stannis nodded, his eyes roaming the group of men and warriors behind the young wolf. The two men had decided to talk alone away from their respective retinues, king to king. Stannis was dressed in dark steel and chainmail, a cape of black with his fiery stag slightly billowing from his shoulders. Robb was dressed in plated leather without mail or steel plate. His back could barely hold up to the weight of the leather armor. "I see you now control the army of the Reach," Stannis said, his tone bitter and annoyed. "How convenient for you." Robb shrugged. The movement itself caused Robb considerable pain, but he refused to let it show. Ser Baelor Hightower, the heir to Old Town, had given him a numbing agent that he had gotten from a friend of his at the Citadel. It had helped a little, but not much. The maester had suggested more poppy wine, but Robb had refused the offer. He needed a clear mind when dealing with Stannis. "Were you expecting them to follow you after you murdered your brother?" Robb asked bluntly, watching the other man closely. Stannis didn't so much as bat an eye when accused of kinslaying. Stannis raised an eyebrow. "The Tyrells are greedy whoresons who will open their legs for anyone who will give them power," he said evenly. "I was not expecting them to do the right and honorable thing." Robb's face went slightly red as he checked his anger before he lashed out at the older man. Once again, Stannis was throwing the fact that Robb's father supported him back at the Northern King. Robb was positive that if his father saw what Stannis had become, then he would never bend the knee to the man. "This is not about power, Stannis," Robb growled. "This is about justice." Stannis scoffed. "Do not lecture me on justice, boy. You know nothing of the concept." Robb's eyes narrowed. "Justice is not killing your brother in cold blood through the use of foul magic," he said coldly. "I was there, I saw what happened." Stannis's eyes narrowed as well, and Robb knew his words had struck a nerve. "Renly died like the traitor he was," Stannis said yet again, not denying that he had anything to do with the death of his younger brother. "He would not acknowledge my claim as king and went as far as to put a crown on his head. He was a traitor and died a traitor's death, just as all others will." Robb laughed harshly. "No man is as accursed as a kinslayer," he said, quoting his father's words. Stannis ground his teeth. "I do not believe in such superstitions," says a man who is a purveyor of dark magic. Robb shot back. "Say what you will, then leave. I will not stand here and bandy words with a boy." Stannis snarled, his patience now gone. Robb shrugged again, something that was getting on Stannis's nerve because it was a common habit of Renly's. "I have a host of 25,000 at my back and more on the way. You will soon be outnumbered, Stannis. Surrender and I swear my justice will be quick and painless." "You think because you beat the Kingslayer that you can now stand against me?" Stannis challenged. "Come then, young wolf, and show me just how powerful you are," he said before turning around and riding away. Robb just nodded. "You'll see," he said softly to himself, as he turned around and rode back to his commanders. Renly's war council had been a mixed group of veterans and sycophants who had filled the Baratheon king with grand ideals of war, even though none of them had stepped foot on a battlefield themselves. Robb had been quick to get rid of all these men, only keeping around those who had proven themselves in battle. His patchwork war council was made up of veterans like Randyll Tarly, Mathis Rowan, Bryce Carun, Ser Baelor Hightower, and Paxter Redwine, grizzled and savvy campaigners who knew war and strategy. "Stannis will not surrender," Robb said as he approached the group. No one seemed surprised. This was the same man who held out against an overwhelming number of Reachmen for the entirety of his brother's rebellion. Stannis Baratheon's will was like iron, unbending and unbreakable. Randyll nodded. "We knew he wouldn't. Now we must make him pay for it." Randyll Tarly had lived up to his reputation as a formidable commander and warrior. When Robb was planning his attack on the Baratheon force at Storm's End, the man's advice was invaluable, pointing out not only what would be best for Robb's forces, but what Stannis might counter with, and how to effectively counter that as well. It was like the man had planned out the entire battle in his head. Robb's and his military minds had immediately connected as the two commanders prepared a battle plan that would utterly crush Stannis against the walls of the Baratheon's ancestral home. "Agreed," Mathis Rowan said firmly. "We received word this morning from Lord Carron. He and his men are in position." The Lord of Nightsong was one of the few Stormlander lords who did not go over to Stannis. after Renly's death. Robb had left the men in charge of the infantry, sending them down through Summerhall while Robb had taken the cavalry and had ridden northeast to the King's Road before turning south towards Storm's End. The plan was for the infantry to come in from the west and hold the enemy in place while Robb smashed them from the north. Robb nodded grimly. Then we're set. We attack at dawn, gentlemen. The group rode back to camp, slowly breaking up as the others returned to their respective tents. Robb, flanked by Garland, Loras, Small John, Dacey, and Darren, rode towards the center of the massive camp where Robb's tent was situated. The Tyrells had wanted to give Robb a tent as grand and spacious as Renly's, but he had denied the gracious offer. He had instead settled for a plain, large tent where he was able to meet with his commanders and have a small, screened-off area for his personal quarters. When the group made it to Robb's tent, Garland followed Robb into the command tent, while the others had gone off by themselves. "Are you sure you know what you're doing, Your Grace?" Garland asked worriedly as he and Robb entered the tent. The two men had known each other for a week, but it didn't take long for Garland to realize why Robb was so loved and respected by his friends and bannermen. He was a breath of fresh air for the men of the Reach, a man who said what needed to be said, niceties be damned. He was not like Randyll Tarly, whose words hit like a blunt knife, nor was he like Orton Merryweather, whose words were so sweet that they could be mistaken for honey. He said what was needed, and meant what he said, but did so in a manner that conveyed respect for others' opinion. Robb entered the tent before turning to speak to the Tyrell knight. "Stannis will make an attempt on my life. I know it. All the more reason to put guards around your tent," Garland pressed. "Maybe it will dissuade." He got no further. "You didn't see what I saw, Garland," Robb said, his voice low and soft as he remembered that terrible night. What Robb saw, what it did to Renly, it would haunt the Northern King for the rest of his life. This is not a normal assassin. This is a ghost, a demon. It cannot be killed by normal means. Garland sighed. "There's a reason you have guards," he said, annoyed. "They are for your protection, to prevent you from being killed by knives in the dark." Robb nodded. "I know, and I thank you for assembling skilled warriors, but two of them, Sir Robert and Brienne, got flung around like leaves in the wind. My guards were designed to protect me from enemy soldiers on the battlefield, from mortal enemies. This is not the same. I need to face and defeat this monster alone." The group that Robb was referring to was a collection of select warriors, all selected by Garland, to protect Robb. Small John had brought it up one night, talking about Robb's battle guard. The large northerner had talked about the unit with pride, calling it his greatest honor. Garland had taken it upon himself to create something similar for Robb. The new guard, or Southern Guard as Small John jokingly called it, was made up of Sir Robar Royce, Brienne of Tarth, Sir Garth Greysteel Hightower, Sir Roland Storm, and Sirs Horas and Hobber Redwine, the twin sons of Lord Redwine. All warriors had been hand-picked by Garland for their skill and character. Most were not battle-tested, but after watching Garland spar with many of them at Bitterbridge, Robb could see that they were still warriors of great skill. Garland frowned but finally conceded the fact. "I hope you know what you're doing, Your Grace." Robb nodded. "I do," he answered, before adding, "and if it all goes to hells, then I have Tarly standing by to take over as commander of the army. Either way, Stannis will pay for what he did to his brother." Garland huffed but nodded. He bowed and made to leave, but Robb stopped him. "Garland, is Loras still intent on heading back to Highgarden after Stannis is dead?" Garland was caught off guard but nodded. "He is, Your Grace. Renly was everything to my brother. Fighting for another king. It's probably better to leave behind the horse that won't budge." Robb nodded slowly. "Shame. We never got along, and I don't believe we ever will. But he's good. Very good," he said thoughtfully. "I'd hate to leave a swordsman of that caliber here in the Reach, especially if I go into the proverbial lion's den." "I'm sure Margaery will find a way to persuade him to fight for you," Garland said. "She's always been the best at reasoning with him." Robb smiled. "She is a remarkable woman." "Set to be married to an equally remarkable man," Garland replied easily. He bowed once more. "I will spread the word amongst your guard that you are not to be disturbed." Robb nodded. "Thank you. Tell them to check on me in the morning. If all goes right, then I will be asleep in my bed." "And if all doesn't go well?" Garland asked. Robb smiled grimly. "Then I will be quite dead." Line break. Robb sat in his tent with his sword, claw held point down in his hands. It was late, and Robb had only a few candles lit. Normally, the muted conversations of soldiers might be heard outside, but word had been spread around the camp that the king in the north wanted to be alone for the evening. With that in mind, many soldiers steered clear of the central tent. Even Greywind, Robb's trusted and constant companion, was away. The giant wolf was away for the night, stretching his legs as he roamed the woods, hunting and basking in the freedom that he usually doesn't have during the day when he is at Robb's side. The warrior known as the Young Wolf loathed to admit it, but he was happy that his friend was gone. The last thing he wanted was his wolf hurt or killed protecting him. Robb had spread the rumor because he didn't want any man injured on his account, not when they didn't have the proper means to protect themselves. It was clear that normal steel would do nothing to the demon. Brienne and Robar had demonstrated that. The only other person who could kill the damn thing was Lord Tarly, but Robb didn't want him hurt or even killed either, as he was Robb's second in command. Robb's eyes were trained on the candle he had placed directly in front of him. The memory of the night Renly died playing over and over inside his head. He knew that the first thing that would happen would be a strong breeze that would rip through the tent and nearly extinguish the candles. That would be Robb's first alarm. Robb's foot tapped nervously on the floor, anxiety flowing through him. He was not a patient person, not like Jon, who seemed able to sit still for hours. Robb had always been a much more active person. Sparring, riding, hunting, even when playing the rare game of Cyvasse, he usually got himself in trouble because of how aggressive he was while playing. During the Battle of Whispering Wood, nothing had gone through his head. He was simply focused on killing the man trying to kill him. Now only one face flashed in his mind. One name. He wanted to see her face again. Just once more. Robb had liked girls before, but never to this extent. This was love. Pure and simple. Robb's mind was torn from his thoughts when he saw the candle flicker, if only slightly. He felt the breeze go through the tent, though it was not as strong as it was on the night Renly died. The wind that night had been strong enough to put a fire out. This one barely made the candles flutter. Even still, it was abnormally strong, and Robb knew that it had come. Robb began to count under his breath. 1. Robb's heart started to race as he counted, yet everything seemed to be happening in slow motion. The grip on his sword tightened, his leather gloves creaking gently as he shifted forward in his chair, preparing to rise. 2. Robb forced himself to breathe slowly, trying to calm himself. He had to plan his moment just right. If he missed, he died. There was no second chance. 3. Robb rose to his feet, twisting his hips as he turned. He did not have time to switch his feet around and instead used the momentum of his turn to add power to his swing. 4. As Robb turned, he saw the smoky figure rise from the ground. It was just as Robb remembered, a being made of pure darkness, with the face of Stannis Baratheon. Except this demon was different. The one that had killed Renly seemed stronger, fuller if it could be described in such a way. This monster seemed to shimmer and wax in the light as if it wasn't fully formed. 5. Claw came flashing up, intercepting the dagger made of pure smoke that had appeared in the figure's hand. When the two blades clashed, the sound they created wasn't like anything Robb had heard before. It was a dull metallic thud like a hammer on an anvil without the ring after the strike. The monster seemed confused by the fact that its dagger hadn't gone through Robb's sword. Valyrian steel, Robb growled. It's what killed you last time. The monster roared and struck at Robb again, but the young wolf was ready for it. Robb knocked over his chair as he leapt forward, sinking claw to the hilt in the shadow being. The monster roared and backhanded Robb, sending him flying across the room, although this time he landed on the thick carpet, and not a solid table. Even still, Robb's back was instantly awash in pain, as the muscles seized up, preventing the Northern King from moving his torso at all. Robb turned his head, looking between the legs of tables and chairs at the demon. It roared and clawed at its chest, where remarkably Robb's sword was still stuck. Every time the monster tried to grab the blade, it roared in pain as if it were being burned by the metal. The monster grew smaller and smaller as if the sword sucking away its very life. Soon, when it was no smaller than a child, the demon imploded, sucking all the air out of the tent as its essence was scattered and destroyed. Claw clattering to the ground when the monster was gone. Robb tried to roll over in an attempt to stand, having some amount of success as he was able to get on his hands and knees. The pain was overwhelming, making Robb's vision swim and his brain feel fuzzy. Getting back to his feet was one of the hardest things Robb had ever done. It was like there were burning steel rods strapped to his back, melting his skin. Eventually he was able to get back on his feet, grabbing onto the nearby objects to support him. He shuffled painfully over to where his sword lay and used the tip of his boot to hilt onto his other foot before he kicked the sword into his hand. Using his sword as a cane, he maneuvered himself into a comfy chair and sighed in relief as he did so. The pain in his back was unbearable, but at least he was alive and the monster destroyed. Well, Robb said to himself, that was easier than expected. John 13. The room was in pandemonium as the lords of the North and Riverlands got at each other's throats. The northern lords were beyond furious that their homeland was being invaded and raided by Ironborn, and all wanted to return north and drive the invaders out. The lords of the Riverlands were angered by this and argued that their homes were also under attack, and yet they weren't fleeing from the fight. Overall, it was chaos. Jon again was leaning against the wall watching the argument. He didn't take a true seat on the council. He hadn't been asked to join, and so he felt like it wasn't his place to speak or join in on the conversation, unless asked to give his opinion. The Blackfish continued to try and take back control of the council, but was having little to no success. Whenever he had some semblance of order, it would crack and shatter when another argument flared up, and the entire room would dissolve back into chaos. The older knight was done being patient. Enough, Sir Brendan bellowed, slamming his hands on the table as he came to his feet. Enough, all of you. The multiple arguments in the room slowly came to a halt as all eyes looked towards the older knight, whose face was dark with anger. Sir Brendan was a grim, serious man most of the time, with a dry sense of humor that could be like a whip on any he turned it on. He very rarely lost his cool, but when he did, it was a terrifying sight. Shut up and listen, all of you. Sir Brendan growled now that there wasn't a need to raise his voice. The lords retook their seats, though still sending glares and dirty looks at the men they had just argued with. When everyone was seated and still silent, the Blackfish continued. I understand that you want to return north, he said, looking at the northern lords, and we will not leave the north to be invaded, but we are sworn to King Robb, and you cannot abandon him. What would you have us do? The Greatjon rumbled angrily. Sit here on our arses while our homes are taken by those iron bastards, led by that traitor Theon? Never. Sir Brendan responded instantly, his voice becoming a little less violent now that he had firm control of the room. I understand that you fear for your homes, I do, but we have to hold to our oaths. I promise you, the North will not go undefended, but we cannot send more than half of our force back home, not when Tywin Lannister is sitting on our bloody doorstep. What would you have us do? Lord Glover questioned angrily. Lord Bolton, Sir Brendan said, looking at the Lord of the Dreadfort. Take your men along with what's left of the Dustins and Risewells, and march north. To Jon, Lord Bolton was the easy choice. He was the next best commander next to Roland Hawker, and combined with his men and two smaller northern houses, it should be more than enough to provide a decent host to fend off the Ironborn invasion until more northerners could be rallied to protect the north. Lord Bolton nodded. Sir Brendan, allow me to take the phrase as well. I will not be able to rally more men till I am in the north. Sir Brendan glanced towards Sir Stefan, who looked surprised at the man's request. The aging heir of the crossing looked back at Sir Brendan, nodding slowly. If Lord Bolton needs our assistance, then we are more than willing to help. Sir Brendan frowned. He did not trust the phrase or Lord Bolton. The phrase have always been soft-spined, and erring over everything they did. They could never be relied upon to stand by your side when things got tough. Then there was Rose Bolton, a man that seemed equally untrustworthy. But Sir Stefan was one of the better phrase. He had always tried to break away from his father's unfortunate shadow, no matter how hard that was. He was someone Sir Brendan could trust. Though just barely. Fine. Sir Brendan allowed, although loathing to give up 4,000 men more. You said there were men you could rally in the north. Roose nodded. My second wife was a Racewell. I'll be able to bring Lord Racewell and his daughter, Lady Dustin, to my side when I enter the north. Bastards should have been by our side from the start. Lord Karstark grumbled. Pure rubbish, ignoring the call for vengeance. When Robb called his banners, he received scant support from the Dustins and Raswells. Barbary Dustin had always been in love with Brandon Stark, Lord Eddard's older brother who had been murdered on the order of the Mad King. When Ned took up the title as Lord of Winterfell, Barbary had been unhappy, but that didn't stop her husband, Willem, from going south during Robert's rebellion. All ties between Barrowtown and Winterfell had been severed when Eddard Stark had returned to the north without Willem Dustin, returning only the man's horse, but not his bones. Since then, the woman had always held a grudge against Ned Stark for bringing the bones of his sister home, but not those of her husband. That had been why the Dustins had sent so few soldiers to help the young Robb Stark rescue his father. An act her father Lord Roderick Riswell of the Rills had followed as well. Sir Brynden nodded to Lord Karstark, acknowledging the point. Regardless, if you can muster them, do so. Once you have their men, send the Freys back south. They'll be needed here. Lord Bolton nodded, acknowledging the order. Have the remaining men in the north been rallied to repel the Ironborn? Lord Blackwood asked curiously. Sir Roderick is mustering a small host at Winterfell, Eddard Stark answered. So far, it's only made up of men from Winterfell and Castle Sarwyn. Hopefully, the Manderleys or even the mountain clans can lend their aid as well. I will send a raven to my son to muster what men he can. Lord Bolton promised. Your bastard son, Ser Wylis Manderley asked suspiciously. There's been some foul rumors about the boy. How do we know he can be trusted? Lord Roose raised an eyebrow. Baseless lies, Ser Wylis. No witness has ever come forth to verify my son's alleged actions. I agree with Manderley. The Great John rumbled. The rumors are worse than foul. They're sadistic. Lies, my lord. Lord Roose argued calmly. My son has been accused of no crime and has been found innocent of any allegations. He is ready to show his loyalty to the north. Sir Brynden looked between the northern lords and Roose. He was curious to know what these rumors were, but it was not his place. If Roose said that his son can be trusted, then Sir Brynden had no choice but to believe him. Do it, he ordered. I'll leave you to coordinate with Sir Roderick when you cross the neck. What's happened to your brother, Lord Roland? Lord Mallister asked, looking at the grim Lord of Eagle's Roost. The bastards were able to pull my brother south towards Cape Kraken. Lord Roland grunted. Ilan sent part of the Iron Fleet to distract him while Victarion and the other captains went around my brother. How do you know all this? Lord Bracken asked, surprised. My brother has the mate to the hunting falcon I have with me, Hawker explained. Mates can find each other across any distance, and return to their masters. His falcon arrived when the raven from Sir Roderick did. What does your brother plan on doing now? Sir Brynden asked. He's heading back north towards the stony shore, Roland explained. He's making his way to Blazewater Bay where he hopes to reprovision at Barrowtown. He intends to then leave ships at the mouth of the river that leads to Torrens Square and block the Ironborn in as he sails north and deals with the others. Why not attack Victarion? Eddard Stark asked. Kill their leader. Victarion Greyjoy is not someone you attack, Lord Hawker explained gruffly. Not without a lot of bloody help. No, my brother will keep the fucker contained on the river while he sends the rest of the Iron Fleet to the bottom of the fucking sea. What about my home? Lord Glover asked angrily. Deepwood Motte, a castle on the edge of the Wolfwood across from Bear Island, was home to House Glover. It was one of the locations in the north that had been attacked by the Ironborn. The other areas were Bear Island, Torrens Square, and the Stony Shore. John had never seen it himself, but Sir Roderick said that it was built in the fashion of a ring fort like the first men built when they first settled the land. Sir Roderick can deal with that. Sir Rendon said, that is the best place to attack the Ironborn when they're away from their ships. He knows that and will exploit it. Has there been any word on the king? Lord Mallister asked now that the issue of the Ironborn in the north was more or less settled. Sir Brynden looked at John, gesturing for him to explain. John nodded and stepped forward, crossing his arms. My brother had a raven sent from Highgarden. He's okay and has gained control of the army of the Reach. Roughly 80,000 men. From what I understand, he plans to go after Stannis for killing Renly. Stannis killed his brother? Bracken asked. That's madness. John nodded. Aye, it's a bitter thought, but if Robb believes that Stannis did it, then my brother is going to do his best to bring Stannis to justice on the account of kinslaying, John explained. I'm sure he'll send another rider or raven with his orders for us. Did he say how he managed to gain the armies of the Reach? Edmure asked. John shook his head. His grace left a lot of information out, unfortunately. As of right now, all I know is that he has a mighty host and means to head into the Stormlands with it. So what do we do now? Edmure asked, looking between his uncle and John. It was a question on all of their minds. Have we secured our territories in the Westerlands? Ser Brynden asked. From Banefort to Hornvale, Lord Glover answered, all flying northern banners. Lord Umber, Lord Gover, take half of the northern force and take Crayclaw. Lord Corstark and Lady Mormont will take Cornfield. Ser Brynden ordered, Edmure, you and Ser Mark will take 500 riders each, and patrol around Highheart and Pink Maiden. Just those areas, he growled, looking at the two men. The Mountain and his raiders have been spotted in that area, as well as another group known as the Bloody Mummers. They are sellswords under Tywin's employ. Stay away from the Mountain, but put down the sellswords if you come across them. What about the Brotherhood without banners? Ser Mark asked curiously. The group known as the Brotherhood Without Banners was a band of outlaws that had, for whatever reason, been waging guerrilla warfare against the Lannisters in the southern Riverlands. They had even clashed with the Mountain and his raiders from time to time. A few of the merchants able to make it from the south to the northern Riverlands have said that the Brotherhood has protected many villages and hamlets from the marauders, even providing food when possible. The council still hasn't learned who led the group, but there have been rumors that they have even attacked northern patrols who had been caught harassing villagers and defenseless peasants, showing that they weren't allied with any side. Capture them, Ser Brynden said after a moment. Their actions, while honorable in origin, have become criminal as of late. I want them brought to Riverrun if possible. What are the rest of us supposed to do? Lord Bracken asked, annoyed that others had been given important tasks. I will give you all assignments later. But for now, we are well stocked with food and resources. When we move out or run short, I will send more parties into the Westerlands to get us more supplies. The older knight's answer seemed to placate many of the lords who hadn't been given roles to do. The lords, while acknowledging they were at war, longed to finish fighting and go home with their men. Sitting in Riverrun with their men camped outside was beginning to become dull and boring for many of them. Ser Brynden rapped his knuckles on the table. That will be all for today, he said. We have work to do. Robb's fight with the Shadows certainly hadn't helped his recovering back. The maester who had checked him out afterward had been rather annoyed that the injured king had done what he did, but he had promised that Robb's back was no worse than what it had been. The carpet, thankfully, was thick and robbed the ground of any further damage to Robb's back. It did not, however, make it look any better. It was still a black and blue mass that was hard for any man to look at. Ser Baelor had tried again with his numbing agent, but it didn't have the same effect. Robb's back was either a dull ache or in burning pain, and it seemingly went from one extreme to the other without warning. Now Robb had to mask his pain as he faced Sir Alliser Florent, Stannis' hand in the Lord of Brightwater Keep, and his older brother Sir Axel Florent, Castellan of Dragonstone. Alliser was an older man, tall and slender with a long, elegant face. His hair and beard were both neat and well-groomed, both silver from age. He wore ornate, red-gold armor, the snout of a fox sticking out from his breastplate. His brother Axel was far less regal than his brother. He was short and muscular, with a sagging double chin and close-set eyes. To a point, he was ugly, and the scowl he now wore on his face only enforced the fact. He too wore a set of armor, but it was not as regal as his brother's. It was as if the man had skinned multiple rabbits and foxes and hastily fixed the hides to ringmail. The two Florents had been dragged before Robb when his host had moved into battle positions that morning. Apparently, Stannis had been found dead that morning, and with Robb's army approaching, the lords of the Stormlands had quickly surrendered and begged Robb for leniency, handing over the Florent knights as proof of their loyalty. The young wolf had quickly agreed, asking only for them to pledge their men to his cause, something they readily did. Now Robb's already massive host had swelled by another 20,000 men as the Stormlords fell in line behind the Stark king. The lords of the Blackwater had fled when Stannis' death was made public, with many taking their men and ships and going home. The only lord who had stayed behind to pledge his loyalty to Robb Stark was Montford Valerion, the master of Driftmark, and his bastard brother Orain Waters. I'll ask you again, Robb growled. Where is the Red Woman? The young wolf had been questioning the captured knights for a few minutes now, trying to find out more about Stannis' death and the whereabouts of the Red Priestess, but was having little success. The two men were devoted zealots to the woman and her foreign god. She's gone, Alliser answered, not meeting Robb's gaze. We don't know where. Robb sighed in annoyance. I warn you for the last time, sir. Stop lying to me and tell me where the blasted woman is. She is a purveyor of dark magic and made an attempt on my life. You will tell me where she is. Sir Axel stepped forward, his face red with anger. The elder brother had a fiery temper, which Robb had found out soon after meeting the man. "We'll never give her up," he spat. "She is on a sacred mission from Relawar to find Azor Ahai. She must find him so that he can stop the Great Other." Robb narrowed his eyes. "I care not what her god told her to do. She tried to kill me. I do not take kindly to people who do so, especially with the use of black magic and demons," he snarled. He sat up straight in his saddle and looked down at the two men. "Your sister Silas. She was not reported to be with the army. I assume she's back at Dragonstone." Alistair narrowed his eyes, not answering. Axel also shut up, putting as much venom as he could into the glare he was giving Robb. Both men were fiercely protective of the woman that was their queen. "I swear, Stark," Axel warned, "if you touch her, then tell me where the Red Priestess is. Blast you," Robb roared. Alistair lowered his gaze, staring at his boots. He stayed like that for a few moments before looking back at Robb. "She's heading for Dragonstone," he said, his voice dripping with hate. "Threatening a woman to get information. So much for the vaunted honor of House Stark." Robb glared at the man, a look that Alistair returned. "Do not speak to me about honor, sir. Not after what your king did." "King Stannis was a good man," Axel growled. "He was just and honorable. He would have been the best king Westeros has had in 50 years. "Forgive me if I don't count kinslaying as an honorable trait," Robb shot back. "We told you what you wanted to know, Stark. Now release us." Alistair snapped. "But do not expect us to bend the knee like that traitor Montford." Robb shook his head, gesturing to some nearby guards. "I'm afraid I cannot release you. I do not trust you, nor do I have any reason to. When my forces take Dragonstone, Lady Selyse and her daughter shall be escorted to Storm's End, as befitting of the lady's late husband. She will remain there under the care of Sir Courtenay Penrose," Robb said. "You two, on the other hand, shall spend the rest of the war in the dungeons of Highgarden, until I can decide what will be done with you. I will also have forces sent to Brightwater Keep, where your son Elechine shall yield the castle to my men, and he will remain there as well until his fate can be decided." "You would rob us of our ancestral home," Axel roared, stepping forward. Greywind, who had been sitting at Robb's side, growled, instantly coming to his feet to defend his master. The threat of the giant wolf had forced the man to step back, his eyes glancing between the young wolf and the dire wolf. Robb turned his glare on the ugly man. "Perhaps, but that is no longer your concern." "Guards!" Robb snapped. Half a dozen guards bearing the sigil of Highgarden came forward and grabbed the two knights, taking them away. Ser Alistair walked away with his head held high, trying to preserve his dignity while Axel struggled against his captors, yelling abuse at Robb until one of the guards gagged him. "Thank the old gods," Robb muttered tiredly. "That was well handled, your grace." Lord Rowan praised from behind Robb. "The Florents have always made trouble for the Reach." "Careful, Mathis," Lord Tarley rumbled. "My wife is a Florent." The Lord of Golden Grove blanched. "Of course, forgive me." He apologized quickly. Randall nodded once and dropped the subject, content that the message had gotten across to his peer. "Who else is there?" Robb asked. Garland gestured for the next prisoner to be brought forward. He was a middle-aged man, slight, with an ordinary face, and brown eyes. His beard and thinning brown hair were peppered with gray. He did not wear plate armor like the two knights. He wore no armor at all. Instead, he was clothed in simple woolen clothing with a plain brown cloak. The only thing of note that could be said about him was his left hand, where each finger was noticeably shortened by one joint. Sir Davos Seaworth rose to fame during Robert's Rebellion when Mace Tyrell had directed his entire force to besiege Storm's End, hoping that hunger and strength of arms would soon force a young Stannis Baratheon to yield the castle to the Reach. But the young Baratheon had held out against impossible odds. On the brink of starvation, Seaworth, a smuggler from Flea Bottom in the slums of King's Landing, had slipped past the Red Wine fleet blockading the castle and braved Shipbreaker Bay, the perilous patch of water just below Storm's End, to deliver onions and salted fish to the starving people of Storm's End. Because of that one event, he earned himself the title of Onion Knight. The last-minute provisions had allowed the castle to hold out until Robb's father arrived to break the siege. Stannis, although grateful for the help, had still shortened Seaworth's left hand as punishment for his smuggling past. Stannis had done the deed himself and knighted the smuggler soon after, taking him into his service. "Sir Davos," Robb greeted casually, nodding to the odd knight. Well met. I trust you have not been treated too harshly. Sir Davos bowed, his chains rattling as he did. Well met, your grace, he replied. He looked down at his wrists before looking back at Robb. I must admit, I spent the better part of my life avoiding having my hands bound. And now? Garland asked. Seaworth shrugged. Not as bad as I imagined, he answered humorously. I congratulate you on your victory, King Robb. Robb raised an eyebrow. My victory? He asked curiously. There was no battle fought. Sir Davos shook his head. You slew the shadow, your grace. Although in doing so you claimed the life of my king. I congratulate you nonetheless. Robb shared a glance with Garland, who looked equally as confused. Stannis, nor Axel or Alistair, had confirmed that Stannis had had a hand in killing Renly. Now the Onion Knight stood before Robb, practically admitting the fact. Robb leaned forward in his saddle. Are you saying that Stannis killed Renly? He asked carefully, curious to see the man's reaction. Davos's face fell slightly. Stannis was once a good man, your grace, please believe that. Everything your father stood for, Lord Stannis did as well. When that red woman appeared, her magic instantly came over the queen, Lady Sellis. She never had control over Stannis. What changed? Garland asked. The war, Davos sighed. King Stannis revealed Joffrey's true birth and expected lords to flock to his banner. None did. Instead, his brother crowned himself king of the Reach and Stormlands. You yourself, King Robb, was named king in the north. He saw you all as people who were trying to take his rightful throne, and he became bitter and angry. That's when the witch's magic started to affect him. Davos's shoulders slumped. He looked like a father admitting the sins of his son. I was there when the priestess birthed that foul shadow spawn. I immediately went to my king, telling him what had happened. He had waved me aside, saying that she was doing his bidding. The next day, I heard of Renly's death, and I knew that Stannis had ordered the assassination of the man. That's when I knew in my heart that Stannis was not the man I pledged my loyalty to all those years ago. He had changed. Why did you never leave? Robb asked curiously. He felt for the man, truly. Having to watch the man he served so faithfully, believing that he was a good man, turn into something so bitter and dark must have been horrible to witness. Davos shrugged. Perhaps it's because of my time around Stannis, but I held out hope that he would become the man he once was. There were glimpses, of course, and that's what told me that the old Stannis was still there. He gestured to the sword at Robb's side. You put him out of his misery. Robb frowned. What? After Renly's death, I overheard Stannis arguing with the priestess. He had been strangely injured, a thin cut from hip to shoulder. When I asked about it, he waved me off. That's what he was yelling at the woman about. She said that you wielded a sword made of dragon fire. It killed the shadow spawn, and since it was somehow conceived with Stannis's seed, it harmed him as well. Robb's stomach rolled at the idea. Stannis had fucked the priestess and his seed had produced a demon that had gone after Robb and Renly. It was sickening to even consider. So you're saying that by killing the shadow I also killed Stannis? Robb clarified. Sir Davos nodded. Aye, that's the truth, he said sadly. Robb scratched his jaw, glancing at his commanders and Garland. They all looked horrified at the story Sir Davos had just told. They were all followers of the Seven to varying degrees. While tales of blood magic had made their way from Essos and was known about in Westeros, the concept was still reviled throughout the realm from the Wall to Sunspear. What do you plan to do now? Robb asked curiously, surprising both Sir Davos and his commanders. The knight shrugged. Don't rightly know, your grace, he answered honestly. I haven't been my own man for so long, since before the rebellion. Robb nodded slowly. And if I were to ask you to join my service, would you? Davos's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He nodded hesitatingly. Depends on what you would have me be doing, I suppose. Robb smiled slightly. I always need honest men who have a knack for getting the impossible done, he explained. I'm not sure if you know, but Lord Riverrun was the only lord of the Blackwater to pledge his allegiance to me. A Lycene pirate, one that you know quite well, has also accepted my offer, on accounts that I put him into position to make a profit. Davos chuckled slightly, his grim exterior breaking for just a moment. Salah. He's good at what he does, your grace. His resume may be less than pleasant, but he gets the job done. So I've heard, Robb mused. Here's what I am thinking. I do not wish to harm Stannis' family. I am not Tywin Lannister or the Mad King, Would you be willing to bring Lady Selyse and her daughter to Storm's End? Davos thought for a moment before nodding. Aye, I can do that, he answered. Lady Selyse is quite devoted to R'hllor, but her daughter, Lady Shireen, is a good child. I believe she is also infected with grayscale, is she not? Garland asked curiously. Davos frowned. The growth has stopped. She is a wonderful girl with an unfortunate accident. Garland held up his hand. I meant no offense, sir. I am simply asking. Robb raised an eyebrow, surprised with how the man had instantly jumped to the girl's defense. You care for the girl? Davos shifted awkwardly. If I may be so bold. She is like a daughter to me, your grace. She is teaching me how to read, he said, a small wistful smile forming. Robb smiled gently. She sounds like a good person. If you pledge your loyalty to me, I will send you, along with Salad Horsan, to Dragonstone to take the castle. You will bring Lady Selyse and Lady Shireen to Storm's End while I have the Lysine pirates deal with the Red Woman. I'm sure Lord Velaryon would be more than happy to garrison Dragonstone as well, Lord Redwyne commented. Robb looked over his shoulder and nodded at the man. My thoughts exactly, he said before looking back at Sir Davos. After Dragonstone is under my control, I mean to plant the Lysine on Driftmark to interrupt trade and ships going in and out of King's Landing. You can join them as well once Selyse and Shireen are safe in Storm's End. Sir Davos thought for a moment before getting down on one knee, bowing his head. I, Sir Davos of House Seaworth, swear my sword and life to King Robb Stark, Lord of Winterfell, and King in the North. Stand, Sir Davos, Robb commanded. I accept and acknowledge your oath of fealty. I hope to have the same loyalty and service that you gave Lord Stannis for so many years. Sir Davos rose, nodding his head as a guard came forward and removed his shackles. I do not want much, your grace. Just to serve a good man and make sure my family has a better life. Honorable goals, Robb praised. I will call for you later tonight, along with Lord Velaryon and Salladhor Saan. I will await your summons, Davos said once more, bowing then leaving. When the Onion Knight was gone, Robb turned to face his commanders. I believe that will be all for today, gentlemen. I will finalize my plan for taking Dragonstone tonight and tomorrow. We shall decide where next to go. Your grace, if I may, Garland said hesitantly. Do you think it is wise to trust those who were just our enemies? Robb nodded slightly. Montfort Velaryon intrigues me, I'll admit, but my father spoke highly of Sir Davos in the brief moments he had met the man. As for the Lysine, he just needs to be paid. What about the Lords of the Blackwater? Lord Redwyne asked curiously. Do you plan on rallying them as well? Robb thought for a moment before shaking his head. No, I don't believe so. They've already gone home and there's no chance I can bring them back together again. And if they pledge their allegiance to Joffrey? Lord Rowan asked. Robb shrugged. Then so be it, but I highly doubt they will. After all, Stannis was the first to announce Joffrey's true parentage, he said easily. For now, I intend to focus on the enemies we do have, namely Tywin Lannister, whose presence in Harrenhal is beginning to greatly annoy me. If we march north, we can pinch him between our army and his grace's northern army, Lord Redwyne offered. There is the Crownlander force to consider, Lord Tarley countered. I have little doubt that Lord Lannister has them positioned between himself and the capital, now that the Reach has pledged for King Robb. Fair point, Lord Tarley, Robb said. We will march north through the Kingswood to Tumbleton before making our next move. Sound advice, your grace, Lord Rowan offered. Thank you, my lord, Robb said. That will be all for today. I must speak with Sir Courtenay, and make sure a raven is sent to Riverrun. My uncle must know what is happening. The Blackfish has been busy. More than half of the Westerlands have fallen to your men, Garland said. Robb nodded. I trust Sir Brynden to keep the men busy while we wrap up things here in the south. But now we can and must turn our full attention back on Tywin. The sooner we deal with him, the better. He is our only obstacle in the way on our path to taking down Joffrey. This war is almost over, and with the valiant men of the Reach and Stormlands, I intend to end it.